Captain America the First Avenger is the 5th film in the MCU, and it is the debut of Chris Evans into the MCU as Captain America. Everybody knows who Captain America is, but we had never really seen him in a good live-action movie before. I said a good live-action movie, people. A good live-action movie. Anybody trying to talk about that shit from the 90s. So like I said, Chris Evans plays Captain America. This film also stars Haley Atwell as Peggy, his love interest and badass female agent in this movie. Tommy Lee Jones is in this movie. Sebastian Stan. Neil McDonough is in this movie, of all people. What this movie is a straightforward origin for Captain America. This movie tells the story of how Steve Rogers, little Steve Rogers, became one of the greatest soldiers, no, the greatest soldier of all time. Super soldier specifically, because Steve Rogers was put into this program called the Super Soldier Program. Steve Rogers is this little 90-pound asthmatic kid who's got a whole bunch of health problems, but he really loves his country and he really wants to serve. But he keeps getting rejected by every place where he tries to enlist, and then one day he's approached by this guy played by Stanley Tucci. Stanley Tucci is this professor slash doctor who has come up with this super soldier serum, and he helps get Steve into the military by enlisting him in the super soldier program. So Steve becomes a test subject of the super soldier program, and he becomes Captain America by the end of it. All of his attributes have been enhanced to near superhuman levels. Enhanced strength, enhanced agility, enhanced reflexes, enhanced speed, enhanced everything, even metabolism. Captain America and the SSR during World War II, that's where this movie takes place, have to team up to try to stop Hitler and win the war, but first they have to deal with Hydra. Hydra is this rising organization led by the villainous Red Skull. I'm going to start off in a weird place with this movie. I'm actually going to talk about the music first, because when I was rewatching this movie, the one thing that stood out to me upon rewatch was the music. The music is composed by Alan Silvestri, and Alan Silvestri, I think, also did the score for the Avengers movie, which came out a year after this movie in 2012. That means that Alan Silvestri has actually composed 2 of my all-time favorite Marvel musical scores. I have not been too kind to the Marvel musical scores over the years. I've actually felt like most of their scores are very bland and very generic. Not the case in this movie. In this movie, you need music that is powerful, inspirational, triumphant. You need music that perfectly captures the spirit of what Captain America is and what he represents. You would hope to hear musical cues that sound very patriotic and sound very inspiring. And that's what this movie does. This movie has great music. This movie makes you feel it. This movie makes you go, yeah, America! Don't ever listen to anybody that tells you that music cannot elevate a project. It absolutely can. Speaking of things capturing the spirit of Captain America, let's get into Chris Evans as the first Avenger. I'll be honest, when they first announced Captain America was getting a movie, I was kind of like, oh yeah, it's one of my all-time favorite Marvel heroes. Of course I want to see a Captain America movie. Then I heard that Chris Evans was cast to be Captain America, and I was just... I gotta be honest, guys, and eat crow about this. I hated the idea of Chris Evans as Captain America. I couldn't stand it. I bitched about it for months before this movie came out. I said, really? That average to below average acting ass, little annoying shitbag twerp from the Fantastic Four is gonna be one of the greatest American icons in comic book history? No way, I don't buy it. This movie became one of the top 5 moments in my life where I have never been more wrong. Watching one movie, I knew for a fact that nobody would ever play Captain America as great or as iconic as Chris Evans did in this movie. Chris Evans is honestly fantastic as Captain America. He dominates the role the way that Robert Downey Jr. dominated Iron Man before him. Everything that I remember from Captain America from reading his comics as a kid, that's present in Chris Evans in this movie. The determined Boy Scout, the fierce idealism, the unwavering patriotism. He's got the heart, he's got the emotion, he's got the charisma, he's got everything that Captain America should be. It's all throughout his performance in this film. You also got to give a shout out to Sebastian Stan, who played his best friend Bucky in this movie, because Bucky is his best friend. That's a relationship that you need to get right for this movie. You need to feel like these guys could be friends. That relationship really is one of the major emotional backbones of the entire movie. If that relationship fails, then that's just one less thing that has any emotional substance in a movie that doesn't really have a lot of emotional substance anyways, if I'm being honest. But luckily, Sebastian Stan nails it as Bucky, and they nail the relationship between Captain America and Bucky. Another thing that they nail, and another thing that I'd like to nail in this movie, is Haley Atwell as Peggy. Like I said before, Peggy is this badass soldier agent who is with Captain America, who works with him, who helps him. She's there when he goes through the super soldier program. Haley Atwell plays her as a straight badass. She has some truly badass moments in this movie, but that's not just what it's about. It's really about her relationship with Steve, too. They have kind of a natural chemistry. She relates to some of his struggle. As she said early in the movie, she's used to having doors slammed in her face, too. Haley Atwell honestly makes me want to give up my life in America and go to London and find a chick that is just as fine as her and just as badass. Of course, Haley Atwell is on the She Can Get It list, and you know what we gotta do? You know what I have to do. She's on the She Can Get It list. You know what we're doing. Moment of silence, real quick, for Haley Atwell and how fucking fine she is. they have a little bit too much chemistry in this movie. There's actually one really funny scene right after he becomes the super soldier where he steps out and he's taller and she's trying to react to him and see how he feels.
How'd you feel?
Taller.
You look taller.
Yeah, Peggy, we know what happened. We know what was going through your mind and body at that moment. Can't tell if it was Haley Atwell or if it was Peggy or if it was both of them, but they just couldn't help themselves in that moment. I give a shout out to Hugo Weaving as the Red Skull. Sure, Red Skull is your usual stereotypical cliched villain that he was in the comics. He's basically trying to use science and technology to take over the world, and you know, he's bad guy being bad guy, and I get it. Sometimes you can deal with a cliched villain as long as you have a great salesman who is selling you that, and that's what Hugo Weaving is in this movie. Perfectly hammy and over the top for that role. You needed that role to be played that way, and Hugo Weaving did a great job as Red Skull. He does have some pretty good action sequences. Granted, most of those great action sequences are towards the end of the film. The battle between Captain America, the SSR, and the rest of Hydra's forces, all of that is really cool. And there are action sequences early on in the film where they kind of montage through the shit. When Steve Rogers becomes Captain America, he and his team have to go out there and take down some of Hydra's bases. And they just kind of skim through a lot of that. They just kind of montage through it. And even to this day, that shit irritates the hell out of me. I'm like, really? Why are you going to montage through some of the cool parts? I'm not saying tank the movie's pacing by showing all of those scenes. I'm just saying, hey, show me one of them at least. Show me a mission that these guys are on. Honestly, the two best scenes in the movie have nothing to do with action and have nothing to do with Captain America being Captain America. One of my favorite scenes is the one where Tommy Lee Jones is bitching about how skinny Steve Rogers is to Erskine, and Erskine is telling him, no, I think Steve is the right choice. Tommy Lee Jones is like, well, you win wars with guts, man. He takes out a fake grenade, he throws it on the ground in front of all the soldiers, and he's like, grenade! And all the soldiers run and scatter, but what does Steve do? Steve dives on top of the grenade and tries to shield it with his body to protect everybody else. Again, if you needed a scene to perfectly capture what Captain America is, that scene did it. My other favorite scene is the one right after this, where Erskine is talking to Steve and he's telling him why he chose him to be in the Super Soldier program. Basically, a strong man who has known strength his entire life will always know how to abuse that power, but a weak man who has never known strength will better respect the balance of power and will know how to treat it better. I'm paraphrasing, but that's basically what he said. One of my issues with this film is the way the Howling Commandos are portrayed. There's really no attempt made to flesh out the Howling Commandos, Captain America's backup, basically. There's no attempt to make them interesting. There's really nothing that you learn about them throughout the course of the movie. As a result, they feel like ornaments on a Christmas tree. Sure, they're nice and they're there and they help out Cap sometimes, but you feel like ultimately the Christmas tree itself is what matters and you don't really care about the ornaments. Just saying, the characterization of some of the supporting characters in this movie could have been done a little bit better. I think my biggest issue with this film, honestly, is the fact that it didn't really utilize its full potential. This is a superhero film that takes place during World War II. It's wartime in this movie, and instead the war of this movie feels more like a backdrop than an actual big thing. This movie feels more like a superhero comic book film than it feels like a war film, and I get it, it's an origin for Captain America. At the same time, they could have really added another layer of depth to this film by focusing on the harsh realities of war. Some of the ways that war can affect people. This movie didn't really focus on any of that. It kind of just was generic good versus evil type shit. That's fine, it works for this movie, but outside of Cap's relationship with Peggy and his relationship with Bucky, there's really nothing else of substance going on. So it would have been nice to see them turn war into its own character. It feels like window dressing when it could have actually been the driving point of the movie. I really like the first Avenger, guys. It's got great music. Chris Evans is brilliant as Captain America. It's got a handful of scenes that really capture the spirit and the essence of what Captain America is all about. Not to mention the film ends perfectly in present day to segue into the Avengers, which comes out in 2012. It's a solid first start for Captain America's trilogy. I am going to put this in the Silver Age for Man of Steel. Alright guys, those are my thoughts on Captain America the First Avenger. So, what did you think about it, and is it your favorite in the Captain America trilogy? Comment below and let me know. Like and subscribe to the Superfan Show, and as always, if you like what you see, tell me how you feel, and stay tuned to hear more from the Man of Steel. Peace!